So if you're watching this video, then you are watching pretty much the extension of our Timmy Turner tutorial beat, or the Desiigner, how to make a Desiigner type beat, Timmy Turner. What we're doing in this one is going to be going into a little in depth about the mixing and a little bit of the mastering on this. I'm not going to say that this is by any means like the best piece of mastering work I've done, but I can kind of explain some of the tips and tricks I did for this one. So, well, I'm going to go ahead and play at a certain section, and we're going to look at some of the levels. So one thing I'd like to notice, I point out that I have my kicks, one kick that's a higher kick. This will be like my main kick, and for the EQ I got a little boosting cutting out the high. Then the other one I got another EQ, a little bit different, kind of similar though. And this one I would lower. Now these kicks are going to be the same pattern, they're just two different kick sounds. I like to stack my kicks. Then I have my 808. But since I have this distortion on, it brings down the level of my 808. So instead of it being up here, it comes down to here a little bit more. So that was just one thing. What was the other thing? I have my hi-hats on this track pretty low. They're all the way down here. Like 15, so hi-hats are definitely really low. Now I keep all my instruments lower than my drums, because usually they're all processed pretty loud and they all end up stacking, and then during the mastering process the sound comes out a little bit more. I don't have a lot of crazy mastering stuff, but we'll get to that later. So now for this open hat, I pulled it down a decent amount, and I have this reverb. And the reason why I have this pulled down is I don't want it piercing through the mix. I kind of want it very subtle, and also tossing on this reverb would soften it a little bit, especially when we add some wetness, because what that wetness will do is pretty much make more effect pass through. And I made the room decently big. Oh, and one thing I could point out to you guys is the 808 mixing, kind of how I have the EQ, and then how I have my distortion. I'm really not a fan of the piano. Like, I almost want to get rid of the piano because I don't like the melody that much. But we're gonna look at this part. I need a snap on. Heavy bass, and trying to figure out where I have this. Guess it's this one. This heavy bass synth in there, I cut out a lot of the low end because I still have the 808 going on. And if we look, we could kind of see where I was boosting it and where there was none. So they weren't going to really conflict with each other too much. Maybe if we pull some of this 808 down a little, scoot that up. One thing I'm glad about is that the clap and snaps pierce through. So there's not really a whole lot that needs to be discussed. I cut a lot of low and high off of a lot of my stuff though. As you can see, I make sure there's not a lot of stuff that's gonna fight with the 808, because those low frequencies are very sensitive. And once you have a lot of like low frequencies going at each other, it can get muddy real quick. So for the mastering side, I have this soft tube saturation, which kind of just adds a little bit more to the transient. So I just did that to the mastering somewhat, limiting. I just did some of this compression on the loudness, and then some more over here. For this, nothing really matters so much. Now, I try to get people to avoid using mastering and mixing presets, just because you can't really have a preset on just like mixing and mastering that can really, there's no cut and dry thing. I don't know, just something about presets just kind of bugged me about it. But I like doing the mastering clean and open on the Kramer tape. This is a Waves plugin, so I got like the wave shell little thing right here. Well, it's not working, but then I have a L3 Ultra Maximizer, so a lot of compression. Now I could probably do a little bit more. Pretty much I want to do that until I start hearing problems with the audio. That's usually the safe bet to do it. So let's go right here where I have a lot of stuff going on. Yeah, that's Gucci. Then I got a little limiter. So there's some changes that I made, but very so slightly. I mean, but there is no cut and dry thing. I want to make sure for my mastering though that my loudness doesn't peak over 0, because anything up here is just not good. And even coming up to 0 is a lot, and especially for beats, because for mastering you don't really need to master a beat so much until you get the wraparound, because then you want to master the whole project together, so it's all in one. But here, let's just see the levels. So I changed some of the elements. I thought it was going up to 0 a little too much, so I wanted to change some of that. But it sounds a little bit better. So that was some of the tips and tricks for the mixing and mastering on this. It's just making sure your levels are all good, and I have a lot of my. You want to keep in mind that your instrumentals start stacking up, so making sure to keep those pretty low, and then I like to have my drums and such booming through. Now this is just the way that I like to do it. Different people like to mix and master their own way, but yeah, hopefully you guys